12 days to the 2024 presidential and parliamentary elections. Hello and welcome to Election Brief with me, Carlos Caloni. We are live on DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 125, all social media platforms, and around the world on myjoyonline.com. Please stay for details. Now, election 2024 is just around the corner. As the political temperature rises, it's crucial to revisit the dynamics of the 2020 parliamentary elections that saw significant shift in Ghana's political landscape. Now, the NPP suffered a major setback in 2020, losing 32 parliamentary seats, which led to a hung parliament, where both the NPP and the NDC secured 137 seats each. An analysis of the 2020 parliamentary result by the Joy News Research Desk reveals that 100 out of the 275 parliamentary seats were won narrowly, with victory margins being less than 10%. Lead data and research analyst here joins me in studio, Kofi, with more on that. Kofi, first, tell us how the NPP could not get as a majority of the seat in the 2020 elections.
Well, this has been the arrangement of the House since 1996 to 2020. And from 1996, all the time you could see a clear difference between who is the majority and who is the minority. From that 132 seat by the NDC against 62 by the NPP, the closest we had was 2000 when we had the NPP winning the majority by 99 against 91 of the NDC. We saw another close run in 2008 where we had 113 against 105. Now, what you see is that in the years or the election years where we have runoffs, it tends to have, very close, parliamentary dynamics in terms of who is the majority and minority. And in 2020, there was no runoff. In fact, President Akufo-Addo won that election by more than 51%. We saw an equal split in terms of the 275 seats where 137 went to the NDC and 137 went to the NPP with one independent candidate. But you spoke about the 32 seats that were lost by the NPP. Let's look at the, this is the 2020, the net gains and losses for both parties. And as you can see, right, the 32 seats were lost by the NPP in that 2020 election, whilst the NDC gained 31 seats. That's huge. Huge, significant. But the interesting trend is that although the NPP or the NDC gained 31 seats in 2020, there were some seats that were won with very, very narrow margins. Now, let's look at the next slide that talks about an interesting picture of the seats that the NPP actually lost in the 2020 election. These were the biggest losses, the regions that they lost majority of their seats. And as you can see, one of the big swing regions, which is the central region. This is the region that the NPP lost majority of their 32 seats that they lost. 9 seats were lost in the, the central region. Another, swing region, Greater Accra. 7 seats were lost, against the NDC. And they lost 5 seats in the Bono region. 4, again, in one other, key swing region, which is the Western region. They lost 4. And as you can see, they lost 2 from Ashanti region, 2 when we get to the Upper West region, where they lost 2 seats in each of these regions and lost 1 seat in the Oti region. But it wasn't just losses and losses through and through. There were some gains. So let's also look at this interesting, beautiful, graphics that you see on the screen. These are the losses. We've spoken about them already. But there were some, regions that stayed true to the NPP. The seat that they won in 2016, they gave that same seat. Exactly, they maintained them. Ahafo was one of them. The Northern region and Western.
So the 0 means they've not lost any seats there at all.
No change. But there were 3 regions that they actually gained, at least 1 seat. That's the Northeast region, where they won it for the first time since 1992.
And I see water there.
Exactly.
White constituency.
Absolutely. They won that seat, and it was a big, big blow to the NDC.
Exactly.
And for the NPP, it was a big gain in the 2020 election. And we saw Savannah, one region that has been controlled by the NDC since 1992. The NPP managed to win 2 seats in the Savannah region. But there are other interesting details in this 100 seats that you spoke about that were won. What is the distribution? Now, although the NPP lost 32 seats, if you look at the seats that were won with very narrow margins, narrow margins we mean that were won with margins below 10%. There were some that were as low as 0.1. We'll come to that.
Okay.
Now, the NPP had about just 44 of that, not just 44, very significant. NDC had 55. Now, in fact, this means that going into this year's election, NDC, although they were close to majority in 2020 election, they will also be worried about 55 seats that were won with very narrow margins. Some of them which belongs to the NPP. How are they going to protect that? Same with the NPP. You're going into elections where the previous election you fell from, some 160 something to 137. How are you going to protect this 44 seats that go into the election? Now, the last one, which is for me is very, very interesting. These are the seats won with the narrowest of the narrowest. I mean, the narrowest wins we had in the 2020 election. As you can see, Takwa Insuaim is one of them, Rekuduka.
Wow.
These are seats that in this year's election can go either way. Anywhere. I mean, both parties will be looking at it and be saying that, how are we going to win this? In fact, there are 10. If you decide to do the math, you can see that 5 goes to the NPP, 5 goes to the NDC. But if you come here, the last 5 or the 5 that were won with very, very narrow, margins, the NDC holds 3 of them. Ablekuma Central in the Greater Accra region, Savlugu, one of them, and Pusiga. Now, these are the narrowest 5. NDC holding majority of that. Now, if you also come into this area, one other interesting constituency that we all be looking at is Lejokuku, where a certain Okoboy lost with just 1.7 percentage points to Benjamin Ayiku. Going into this year's election is one key place to look at, not just for parliamentary, but also
the presidential as well. Okay, great. Thank you so much for those details from the research desk there. Now, to polling agencies, the Global Info Analytics and Professor Smart Sapon of the Kumasi Technical University are strongly defending their contradictory predictions of presidential result ahead of the 2024 election. Dr. Smart Sapon, who is the Director of Research and Innovation at the Kumasi Technical University, is predicting a 49.1% for the New Patriotic Party and 45.8% for the NPP. For the NDC's John Dramani Mahama there. And the Global Info Analytics, on the other hand, is predicting 51.9% for the John Mahama and 40.5% for Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, respectively. Now, Professor Smart, in an interview with my colleague on the AM show this morning, said his methodology leaves a slim margin of error, insisting on the credibility of his survey result.
For each constituency, if we rank the contribution of the polling stations to the total voter register of that constituency and draw the 50th percentile line, any +1 meant that there's going to be, the way we do 50% +1. So that +1. And then all communities that constitutes the polling stations that adds up to the 51st mark got selected into the list of communities to be visited.
Sizes would usually say plus or minus this. What is your level of accuracy?
In respect of, and what I'm saying is that I have reduced the errors I have control over, which is a sampling error, to the barest minimum. So I've represented the randomness. I represented the randomness across all subsamples of the population, and even up to the point of the respondent's point.
Okay, so to make a point, your level of error is negligible. Is that what you're saying?
Extremely.
Negligible. So close to zero. That's the level of error. Close to zero.
Absolutely. It is not zero, but I like the way you put it, close to zero.
Now, Musa Dankwa of the Global Info Analytics is also defending its survey result, insisting the elections would not lead to a runoff.
Mirrors the failed polls when we deploy face-to-face. We do believe that there's not much difference between them overall. So in Ashanti region, we went back there. We saw John Mahama on 29% in Ashanti region.
On what percent?
29%.
29%. All right.
But the average telephone polls, it was on 27%. So about 2% higher in the field than in the telephone pole. And Dr. Bawumia was on 68% in the Ashanti region, whereas in the field, it was roughly around 65%. So the differences between the field survey and field survey and phone survey, it's not material when you take into account the margin of error. So we are quite happy with what we are getting from these areas as far as the polling is concerned.
Right.
On Friday, we're going to come up with our predictions of what the numbers will be. But from our side, there will not be runoff.
From your side? Because I remember in June, thereabouts, this question came up. Still, as of now, there's not going to be a runoff?
No runoff, no.
Okay, all right.
Now, CDD fellow Dr. John Osai-Kwapon believes the tool survey research should serve as a guide to measure the temperature of the electorate and inform strategy by political actors.
Again, it's whenever I read, these polls, I read them as what are the signals that they are sending to us, the end users, in terms of what they found in, trying to gauge the temperature or trying to check the pulse of the voters. Given the methodological approaches of the work that they're doing, does it help me understand the results that they are getting, and what do I make of the results? So, for example, if you look at the trends from Mr. Musa Dankwa's polls over, I think since 2022, even before the parties chose their flag bearers, you do see certain trends. You'd see places where the candidates have either lost some grounds, made up some grounds, things like that. If you compare Prof's baseline that came out, I believe it was sometime in June, to this one, again, you see, for example, for me, the biggest change that I see there is the number of undecided voters that have gone down. So it's a question of, for me, what are the strongest signals that are coming out from the work of these two gentlemen, and what do you make of it in terms of the implications for the elections? And if you were a candidate or a party, what does it say to you in terms of your strategy?
Now, some traditional leaders in the Western region are lamenting the government neglect of the region. During an interaction with the NDC presidential candidate John Mahama, the Queen Mother of Mpoho, Nana Ebakra, shed tears over issues such as the destruction of water bodies caused by illegal mining, bad roads, lack of proceeds from oil, and many other challenges. And I will take you live to the ground where John Mahama is actually speaking.
We have a situation now. Say a year, yes, oh, men am here 33 police, men am de buy. And so economy now say no, oh, I know the person make one. Meanwhile, economic management won't now down. Budget be a better parliament be a co-economic management team first, normal approval, and sign about cabinet. And so now that economic management team are no assign better cabinet, no approval, and sign our parliament. And it is governance more. One of the things that you have in leadership is a collective responsibility. Say, you don't like one person or what do? You leave. That's the principle of leadership. If you don't agree, if you disagree strongly about something, and you leave. Say, oh, sorry. Now, among the principles of sorry, you say, Yenji, say, Obani or Babe Wari. Now, suddenly, sorry, and say, oh, baby, we are say, Druno, you perceive a chitum. Now, oh, Jen Tumwa, oh, yeah, then, Obetsram, Obefim, you leave. But, won't you mean train? I say, you know. No, I can say they made them encounter into me, you me away from. Na, social economy na, and the control Bibia, And it's a usika sem say it affects education, it affects health, it affects agriculture, it affects sports. Now say if you're Black Stars simple. Black Stars are no much a crack. I come to Umpo now, Koshe no much. Now we need Haji. Now referee will come. And then Black Stars. Sudan, many okase. Omo ambo home macho because a coach na holding then and so Sudan and African Cup of Nations. Black Stars, Kwame Nkrumah Black Stars. For the first time in 20 years, you are qualified. It's a reflection of near Koso a war on my anymore. Now, Oshe Proverbs 29:2. I say, when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people mourn. And no any woman. Osha. World Bank say 800,000 of our people in the last 3 years are falling below the poverty line. The poverty line, I'm saying right now is $2 a day. And to anybody who earns less than $2 a day, you are below the poverty line. Now, within the last 2-3 years, you grow for 800,000 are falling below the poverty line. Now, Osho Mainumuna Ghana Statistical Service say multi-dimensional poverty has increased in every region. Enti ayadia what's the yeshe na yeswano. Osho Afrobarometer reporter. More than 80% of Ghanaians say acquire yanam sono yayira. Now I'm going to know yayira oyede. Say I will sign with you. And Temrena do say you sign it. If you say you twice so I was a crime no star. Near Ebekwa Kobano and your cry. And in your one say I'll say a bayan kasa. That's it. Brofocus expenditure. That's the expenditure also. One of the mistakes I'm buying here is that instead of lowering expenditure, almost increase your expenditure, but are increasing revenue by adding more taxes. Say, Oba now a problem in your family. Now, you can say, family budgets no so. And yeah, anka hamburger obeto ama obano obema na twen kakra also ebiana oni onafofo ekodi omutu ni ade weekends ni ade no so obete so na bicycle anka obeto ama kweko no obetwen kakra se na be ya expenditure no ebeba from kakra na wabomodin either say wo yire ene wo mo bepe edwuma baako bi aka ho to increase the income. Because income and expenditure and now say or expenditure also change or income, it will lead you into debt. And see, I'll say, oh yes, adjustment. And also, every budget there's a huge increase in amount of expenditure, and there's a lot of waste. Afibia Auditor General, and the reporter, 13 billion. Aira in Crawford, the Omusa boom, as a tribute anyhow. And Katasishani project way case iba na yasheda ni ayano wongrai. And then menu kase obia yakuhu sika wonem pass case na way. Yetiam. You know, but senipa anya asotwea, other people will be emboldened to do the same. Entina yedi akase yaba will give unfettered access to the institutions mandated to fight corruption to do their work without interference. Intimaka, Mrs. NDC Abaimba, na Yamawa appointment, na Okasa Obeya. Say, Okoye Bibina Abain so umwa. Enye asem, wasem, Oko kan wasem na Yejawa, wasem. Oko kanso na Woody Foa. Enye asotwea wasa omuma ono, the bema. Enti, eno. As soon as NDC are buying back, yeah, but yeah, a dear friend of National Economic Dialogue. Be paying, yeah, was saying, Into what Senchi conference now the same thing your friend Obia stakeholders, organized labor, religious leaders, traditional rulers, lecturers, lawyers, doctors, Obia baby. And you be economy no chire Obia. Many workers say we are not in charge until we cannot tell the true state of the economy. Ebia na say no mo can say deficit you say and I say you say na entesa. Until ba na you take over na you who books na. You be free mu nyina no mo abehwe na ewom. Say na be ya ye nyina wo you be hu problem e die nim so that ye nyina be som na yes no na yasan peja ya man no ejina na na so. And na bibia ko form koko ejuma no abofom. This year, bear 400,000 tons per any year. Now, I real say my one say, ya jisika for another 350,000 tons. I am fanko. And Tiasre and Crofone say, Omo maye, I think next season, yeah, the back on. Until next season, Coco, I hear Betty Akono. Ya the cat 350,000. I just say, Kebiama. If you say Coco, ya the cat, ya jisika no dada. And so, into me, I'm fat Coco now. Until we're already in a deficit for next year. Then apart from that, oil and gas also baby you pay I na this kaiba. Yankwa yaba abemu we discovered 2 new oil wells. Ghana oil production no course Professor Tamils nyame fa ne creansie yenya gas no on na e sha sene atoabo gas processing plant. Mebeje ya yewie ye. Enne ankanye a trouble gas processing plant in here. And I would have been spending almost $400 million every year on oil, crude oil alone.
Now we'll bring you details of that engagement to you in our subsequent bulletin. But away from that, President Akufo-Addo has expressed strong confidence in Vice President Dr. Bawumia, describing him as a capable and well-prepared leader poised to guide Ghana to greater achievement. The president believes that Dr. Bawumia has the necessary skills and experience to lead the nation to new heights. Speaking at a professional group's event in Kumasi, President Akufo-Addo also criticized former President John Dramani Mahama, labeling him a failed leader who does not deserve a second opportunity at the presidency.
To become presidents of Ghana, Jerry John Rawlings, John Akufo-Addo, John Dramani Mahama, and myself, and another. Of all these, Jerry Rawlings had a second term. John Akufo-Addo had a second term. Nana Akufo-Addo had a second term. The only one who was not given a second term is John Dramani Mahama. There's a reason for it. Was it the Juma and so Ghana for any and nothing Yaman and then also person baby no better. What is he coming to do? 24-hour economy. You couldn't keep the lights on for 12 hours a day here doing some time when you were president, and you're coming to give us a 24-hour economy. How are you going to do that? You couldn't keep the lights on for 12 hours a day in Ghana when you were president. But today you're coming to give us a 24-hour economy. Please, don't let anybody be confused by these things. Young Pet Upia, what prepared 8 years in opposition as my deputy, 8 years in office as vice president, a man of unimpeachable integrity. 16 years I've been operating in Manchester.
Well, that's all we have here on Election Brief. You can log on to myjoyonline.com for more election-related stories. My name is Carlos Kaloni. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great afternoon.